Good evening. Here and online for the last, actually DB evening. Not the last one, but for this year, right? And then a few review and sessions after that. Okay, so try to generate correct motivation before we start to understand karma or cause and effect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sorry for the disturbance. Yeah, happens sometimes. Yeah. So generate correct motivation to understand karma. Why? In order to really completely comprehend how to create for. Yeah. Okay. So generate correct motivation for yourself. And in the front, imagine Sakyamuni Buddha, if you wish, with the masters of India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist traditions, and surrounding yourself, countless beings undergoing individual suffering, overpowered by karma and afflictions, beyond control. So think I have to help them and I have to lead them beyond this kind of suffering of karma and afflictions. And I start with leading them into the prayers.
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings,
No, porque es que el problema es
to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing, transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the three times I prostrate. Tayata, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha. Tayata, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha. Tayata, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha. Sangye, Jodang Sonye, Chonam La, Janjia Badu, Dagni, Kyapsuchi, Dagi, Chujo, Gibe, Sonangi, Jola, Penshe, Sangye, Joba, Sho, Sangye, Jodang Sonye, Chonam La, Janjia Badu, Dagni, Kyapsuchi, Dagi, Chujo, Gibe, Sonangi, Jola, Penshe, Sangye, Joba, Sho, Sangye, Jodang Sonye, Chonam La. Janjo Badu Dani Gyabzu Chi Dagi Chunye Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penshe Sangye Drupa Shu.
Yeah, so karma. And we are the third session on karma, right? The first time we talked about the 4 principles of karma, and the second time we had together with the 10 non-virtuous actions. And last week we went over the 10 non-virtuous in relation when karma is complete, right? From the point of view of the basis, basis, object, and then the intention, right? And the intention was subdivided into 3. And well, motivation, discriminating factor, and affliction. And then the actual deeds, and then the final step. Yeah, so we went over that last time in relation with, what did we do with killing, right? Remember? John or Peter and the sheep. Yeah. So in a similar way, with virtuous activities, also it's important to have all those factors complete. Yeah, you can hear me, but we can hear you also. So okay, now you're on the right channel also. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We good, no? Yeah. Vale. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So then also for virtuous activities, it's important to have all those factors complete, right? So when we have a non-virtuous activity, the less factors that are complete, the better, because the karma becomes less heavy. Yeah. So then, with virtuous activity, we should always make sure all those kasa 4 factors are complete to make the virtue kind of a perfect virtue activity. Meaning, when you do the act of generosity, for example, making a bank transfer to an organization whatsoever, then you have the object, the basis, the money you're going to send, and then you sit down with a kind of good motivation and discriminating factor, knowing this organization is in need, for example, and then you generate correct motivation, and then the affliction, mostly ignorance, is always present. That's why all our virtuous activities we engage in, or all our good deeds, so to say, they often mixed with the affliction of ignorance. Yeah? That means that's exactly the reason why our positive deeds we engage in, are always contaminated. Yeah, we talked about our feeling of happiness is actually, it sounds very depressing, but the feeling of happiness is a suffering of change. Yeah, because the feeling of happiness we have is contaminated. Yeah, that whatever feeling we have of happiness is not everlasting and transforms easily into suffering. There's no satisfaction, as we talked about a few times. So why is that? Because the happiness we experience is a result of positive karma, right? Yeah. So, but it's always contaminated. Why it's always contaminated? Because the motivation of ignorance is always present. Yeah, we come to that later in the model on discovering emptiness, I think it's called, right? One of the models coming up next year. We always grasp at a sense of I. Yeah, we talked about before, when all these destructive emotions are rooted in a sense of a self, and well, not just any form of a self that seems to exist very solid. So we did the check, right? So I counted 3, and everybody gets angry. 1, 2, 3. There you go. And then it's difficult for people to get angry. But then I say, look at your hair, look at your glasses, look what you're wearing. Look at your room. The people will like. And then people say, oh no, I. How dare this person do this to me? I'm not like this. My room is not like that. And then the I comes up, and then to generate anger is very easily. Yeah? So it's very easy. Same with all the destructive emotions like attachment and desire. It's all rooted in a very strong sense of a self, from its own side existing self. Yeah, so that's kind of the root of all our problems. So we come to that later, more than you wish to hear, but that's a very important teaching on emptiness. So when you hear emptiness, you say, oh, great, this is great.
Acciones virtuosas, y en la de los demás es, además de una forma de acumular méritos, un antídoto contra la envidia o los celos. Aun cuando nos refiramos a las personas que nos resultan especialmente irritantes, siempre van a tener aspectos positivos, siempre van a tener algún tipo de cualidad. Está bien reconocerlas e incluso regocijarnos de ellas. Bien, trata de observar a las cosas, a las situaciones y a las personas o a los seres desde esta perspectiva positiva, tratando de fijarte sobre todo en sus cualidades positivas y regocijándote de ellas. Bien, Volviendo al ejemplo, la conclusión de la acción sería ese regocijo. El karma se refiere a ese componente de intención que está presente en todas las acciones que hacemos con nuestro cuerpo, palabra y mente. Todas generan karma porque todas están basadas en una determinada intención. Otra cosa a recordar es que el karma no es fijo. Hay mucha gente que piensa, oh, fíjate lo que me está sucediendo, este es mi karma, no tengo nada que hacer. No, no es así. Esa es una mala interpretación de cómo opera la ley de causa y efecto en nuestra mente, el karma. Eso es que no hemos aprendido las enseñanzas, ¿no? El karma es manipulable, por así decir, en la medida en la que podemos jugar hasta cierto punto con sus condiciones. Por lo tanto, no es algo definitivo. Y respecto, por ejemplo, al hecho de que a veces hay gente que piensa, hoy estoy enfermo, pues esta es una situación, ¿no?, que se me ha producido para que yo aprenda algo de ella. Bien, eso es también una forma errónea de considerar esa situación, porque ya hemos estado enfermas innumerables veces. Si pudiéramos aprender en sí mismo de esa situación, ya lo habríamos hecho. Hay formas más constructivas y más acordes con la realidad de tomarse estas situaciones. De nuevo,
For example, I mentioned before, I think, this lady who practiced kindness for 100 days, committed herself every day to do it. She said it was not easy, but eventually I felt very satisfied. So try to look at those things and then say, oh man, that's great, that's really nice. Yeah, and then automatically that uplifts the mind, so that's kind of one of the important aspects of the training as well. Yeah, so then karma, as we say, is nothing magical, is a cause and effect relationship of body, speech, and mind. So karma is not, there's many misunderstandings with karma. Some people say, oh, I've experienced this, or that's my karma. I have to learn from this sickness, or I have to learn from this depression. That's how it is. But that's often misunderstood, right? It's not that we have to learn because we have been sick and have been depressed since beginner's lifetime, right? So that means we never really learned. If we don't really have learned from it up to now, then one more sickness doesn't really bring much difference if you don't really put it into practice, right? Yeah, so there's often a misunderstanding. So karma is kind of cause and effect relationships of experiences, as we talked about before, and activities or habituation patterns that is just, because we have created causes to do something previously, there's a strong habituation, so we do that again. Or we have an experience of a result of some negativity we've done in the form of suffering or sickness, or we have experience of a positive thing we've done in the form of happiness or pleasure or whatsoever, So that means nothing in our mind, nothing in our experience is beyond the law of cause and effect. Nothing is random. Everything is basically cause and effect related, although it's very complex. Yeah, we talked about also those aspects that karma can be very, very complex. If you get sick in this lifetime, doesn't mean you have created that cause in the previous lifetime. It can be countless lifetimes before, and it gets mixed with other causes and conditions, and it comes together, and then a sickness can appear, right? Yeah, things are very, very complex when it comes to, if you really think about quantum mechanics or those aspects of how information is stored over time and how a particular event evolves by so many causes and conditions of the previous moments of that particular quantum state and the present state, and how that influences with other causes and conditions is very complex. So the mind and our activities are also very complex. Yeah. So that's something to understand well. And then if negative karma that is being created doesn't mean it will, we remember in the first evening we said karma is definite, right? In the sense that if you create positive karma, the result will be happiness. If you create negative karma, the result will be suffering. Yeah, that's the law of reality, as we talked about, right? And then we talk about increase aspect, like a tree can grow from a simple seed with a lot of fruit, right? But also we talked about that karma is individual, remember? That we cannot experience the result created by somebody else, because we have individual types of experience and we have individual forms of habituation patterns, so to say, you know, so it's very individual. And then the last point of karma we went over is karma does not get exhausted until it comes to ripening. Yeah, if there's a seed and you put a seed on the table, nothing will happen, right? A seed for a flower or corn plant or whatsoever, or you put it on the table, nothing will happen. But when it meets the right conditions of fertilization, heat, moisture, and those kind of aspects, then it will grow, right, as we talked about it. But if I destroy the seed or burn the seed, then it will never grow again. And so that in a similar way, karma that has been created in the past does not mean you have to experience it, because it's still within the context of flexibility. Yeah, and I told you the story about my friend who was very good in astrology, and he pinpointed down exactly two very important aspects in my life. One of those events was on the hour almost. It was on 1 hour off, but yeah, I was quite impressed. So then I asked him, what about the future? You know? But then he said, with spiritual people, it's very difficult to predict the future to a certain extent, to be accurate, let's put it that way. Why? Because karma is changeable, right? So you can purify negative karma and prevent a result from coming into being, and you can destroy positive karma and prevent a result from coming into being. Yeah. So that was, we talked about a little bit before, so now we go in that aspect a little bit more in detail, that when karma is being created, until it meets the conditions, its potential will remain, right? The potential will remain until it meets conditions, and then comes to ripening, then it gets exhausted and the potential is gone, right? So in a similar way, if you get angry after you've done positive deeds, then anger can destroy the positive result of a positive deed. Let's say, for example, you practice this generosity to give to a particular organization, and then the next day you get so angry, you know, or the same day. And then then it's possible to destroy that positive potential, right? So anger and any form of affliction has the power to destroy what we call technically the potential for the result to come about. So the potential for the result to come about can be destroyed from positive karma, right? But the root can never be destroyed of positive karma, which is very, very interesting. Yeah, so let's say you do this activity of generosity and you get angry, so you won't experience the result of winning the lottery or something like that, just to keep it simple, right? So, but you might have another virtuous thought later on that thinks, oh, I want to do again an act of generosity, right? So that means the seed or the root of that positive potential, so to say, is not destroyed, but the potential for the result to come about is destroyed, yeah, preventing you from winning the lottery, for example, right? But that seed is still there. That means that again you want to practice generosity, right? And then again you create a cause. Yeah? So that's with positive karma is like that. With negative karma, if you purify it with purification, as we're going to talk about today, with the 4 opponent powers, as we call it, then you can destroy the potential for the result to come about of negative karma, but not the seeds, right? So that's important to know. So with the 4 opponent powers, you can destroy the potential for the result to come about, but not the seed. Yeah, so we're still the same here. With positive karma, if you get angry, you destroy the potential for the result to come about, but not the seed, or the root, as we can say. And with negative karma, with the 4 opponent powers, you can destroy the positive potential for the result to come about, but not the seed or the root. Yeah, so that's up to here is the same, right? But the root or the seed of negative karma can be taken away with the realization of emptiness, yeah, ultimate reality. That we come to that later. And that's why is that possible? Because all our afflictions, as we just saw, with anger and desire, they're rooted in this concept of I, right? That the very concrete sense of I am mine. You know? So if you understand ultimate reality, you see there is no from its own side existing self to be found. Yeah? If you really look in your body, in your mind, then there's a label, you call your own name. Yeah, so I'm being called Namdak, for example. So there's my body and there's my mind, and based on the top of my body and my mind, there's the label, this is Namdak, right? But there's nothing separate from that. There's no kind of entity or self or I that is separate from that all. Sometimes it appears like a very strong sense of a self, and even in neuroscience they talk about, when they talk about subjective experience, they talk about the self, right? And that's very true. A self appears, right? That's many neuroscientists agree upon that. But if this self actually exists or not, that's the question. Right? So Anil Seth, who's kind of a mainstream neuroscientist, he says, yeah, in his book Being You also talks about, but actually the question is, does the self actually exist? Yeah, and then another famous scientist, David Bohm, he says, you know, this self-deceptive thought of self-identity is just a show. He's a quantum physicist, right? He says it's just a show, and a very convincing show. And it feels very comfortable for people, this self that is there, and that's why they take it as an apparent reality, he says. It's very interesting, you know. So that means in Buddhism also we talk about that there is no from its own side existing entity anywhere, not in the materialistic world, and not within the body or within the mind, or a relation with the body and the mind. Yeah, so that means if you understand that ultimate reality, you get rid of this root cause of suffering. Yeah, this sense of an I, because of that we get angry, because of that attachment arises, desire arises, all kind of things, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, fear, is all rooted in this sense of an I, right? Yeah. And we talked about it before, I think, in one of the first models, with destructive emotions, we talked about a little bit that there's this interesting research done by Harvard Medical School, Daniel Brown, that, you know, you sit with a counter underneath the table and you just talk with the person for 10, 15 minutes, and then you count the amount of words, I, me, myself, in the conversation. And then you just put it on a statistic paper, and then you do that with a few thousand people, and then you take a look at the health records. Of course, you have to ask permission, and then you just draw relationships. Very easy, very cheap research. You know, so then they come to the conclusion that actually, the higher the score in words of I, me, myself, because linguistics we know is related with our inner emotional life, right? The way people talk. So then the higher the score in self-concern, so to say, the higher the score also in low self-esteem, depression, high blood pressure, inclination to heart diseases. It's very interesting. That's kind of the root of the problems, as the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, is this ignorance, yeah, this holding on to from its own side existing self. So if you understand and later realize that a self like that actually does not exist the way it appears, right? Then you get rid of this seed or this root aspect of negative karma. So with the 4 opponent powers, as we're going to talk about now, you eliminate the potential for the result to come about, but the seed is left, right? We talked about, yeah, with getting angry, then what you destroy is the positive potential for the result to come about of positive karma. But the seed remains, as we talked about, right? So you can again have this virtuous thought. So with negative karma, with the 4 opponent powers, as we're going to talk about now, then you can eliminate the potential for the result to come about, but the seed cannot be taken away with that. The seed can be taken away with emptiness or with understanding ultimate reality and realizing that. So that in one way that proves that liberation is possible, right? So in Buddhism we talk about nirvana, right? So nirvana is a quality of the mind. Nirvana is not up there beyond the ceiling and go up in the sky or something. Nirvana is a quality of the mind. So nirvana or liberation is a quality of the mind, meaning the mind being free of afflictions. Yeah, that's what nirvana is. Yeah, nirvana is a state to be free of afflictions. Yeah, so when your mind is free of afflictions, then you have accomplished nirvana, right? Yeah. So is nirvana possible or not? That's a big question. Yeah, we talked about previously that destructive emotions can be taken away, right? Because they're not an innate part of the mind, like the clouds are not the innate part of the blue sky, for example. They come and go by power of cause and conditions, and this is also a reason why we can change the mind and eliminate afflictions. And afflictions or destructive emotion are not in accordance with reality. Yeah, we talked about quite a few times. So there's 3 reasons why we can eliminate afflictions, but the more profound reason is that the root of these afflictions, because whenever we get angry or strong desire arises, or anxiety, fear, depression, whatever destructive emotion that arises is rooted in this sense of a self or an I, right? So if you take that away, then you take away the root. Yeah. So with purification in a similar way, the 4 opponent powers, as we're going to talk about, takes away the potential for the result to come about. Yeah. And then you do that, and then eventually you study emptiness a little bit more, and then you realize emptiness, and then emptiness first is a kind of what we call, conceptual realization, and then becomes a direct perception. Yeah? So the guy on the motorcycle is very fast. He thinks everybody likes this. It's very interesting though. People sometimes think we did it when we were young. I was like in this kind of different type of music, and then you turned on the volume, and then you think everybody likes it, but the neighbors probably didn't like it, right? Anyway, this is people online. Sorry, there was a motorbiker coming by. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you see that there's 2 things there, right? That with purification with the 4 opponent powers, you take the potential for the result to come about. That's one. But then you realize later on emptiness. Yeah, emptiness means it's not nothingness. Emptiness. Empty means, empty cup or empty this, empty that, right? But emptiness means empty of something, right? This room is empty of an elephant. Yeah, we always have the classical example. The room is empty of an elephant, right? If you don't know how an elephant looks like, you don't know what I'm talking about, right? So in a similar way, when we say emptiness in general, that means things are lacking or have an absence of inherent existence, have an absence of existing from their own side. Nothing exists from its own side. Everything is lacking that aspect. Yeah, there is no independent reality. Everything is lacking independence. Everything is interconnected. Everything is in the nature of dependent origination, as we call it. Right? So everything is empty or lacking this kind of entity of existing by its own side. Because everything that exists can only exist in relation to other things than themselves, right? So yeah, we come to that later, but now planting the seeds a little bit for emptiness to come, right? Because it's a very challenging topic, and it's not an easy topic, but a very important topic. Yeah, because it's kind of one of the most important teachings of the Buddha, if not the most important teaching, to eliminate afflictions. So then, with the understanding of this reality, if you see there is no from its own side existing I, right? So we lacking, or we have the emptiness of this I, then you come to the conclusion that everything is nature of independence, and then you see this ignorance of this grasping at it from its own side existing I. This ignorance is a wrong view, yeah, and this I, the way it appears, does not exist in exactly that same way. So then you see this emptiness, or you see this lack of this inherent I, and then you meditate on that for a few lifetimes, and then you get a realization, and then you can get rid of these kind of seeds of negative karma. So with the 4 opponent powers, you get rid of the potential for the reasons to come about, and with emptiness, you get rid of the seeds. So with negative karma, you can see that you can completely eliminate it. See that? Well, with positive karma, you can only take the potential for the results to come about away, but not the seeds. So that proves that eventually there's a way up, right? Eventually there's a possibility of purifying more negative karma and accumulating more positive karma, right? And then you go in the right direction, and then eventually realize emptiness, and then you're capable of achieving this nirvana, or this state of being free of all afflictions, because the root of afflictions is being taken away. This sense or grasping at the inherent I. Yeah. So we come to that later. Okay. So then the 4 opponent powers. That was the main topic of today. That helps us to purify negative karma created in the past. Yeah. So I will explain the Buddhist interpretation, and you can have a secular or universal aspect of those 4 opponent powers as well. Okay, so first opponent power is regret, but a very constructive form of regret. Yeah, so regret in the sense that you understand why you did something wrong, or understand why you created negative karma, right? So for example, if you scold a person, right, then if somebody else scolds you, you know how that feels. So you understand that if scolding somebody else is negative, right? So then you have a form of regret, and you say, okay, this is incorrect. I should not do this. So then for a Buddhist, we then confess in front of a Buddha, or in front of a teacher, or in front of an image, or you can just do it by yourself. If you want to do it in a secular way, it's just be honest with yourself, right? If you don't acknowledge your own mistakes, you will never improve. Yeah. And then the real form of regret is just simply saying, this is incorrect, it's harmful to me, it's harmful to others, I should not do this, right? Rather than thinking, oh, I'm such a bad guy or bad girl, and I do this all the time, and it's, and then feel like a sinner, or that's not very constructive at all, right? So often people start thinking, and then low self-esteem comes, and low self-esteem is a destructive emotion, right? So if you want to change your mind, you have to be direct with yourself and say, okay, this is done wrong. It should not be done like this, and now I'm going to change it, right? Rather than, oh, I'm so bad, and I always do this, and that is not constructive, right? Yeah, so that's very important, to be direct with yourself and have this kind of regret. Yeah, you can talk to yourself if you like. Don't talk too much, otherwise people think you're completely cuckoo. But yeah, sometimes it helps to boost you. Sometimes, be kind to yourself, and sometimes be not kind to yourself. To be honest, what I mean, right? That's quite important. Geshe Ben is one of the great masters in Tibet. He was quite like that. When he was eating food with the wrong motivation, he was holding his hand and shouting at everybody, hold the teeth, hold the teeth. So he was very direct with his own mind and his practice. But then when he did something correct, he said, oh, very well done. Sutam Gyatsen, that was his name. Very well done. So that means that he is, sometimes when I'm in retreat, I'm supposed to be in silence, but then I talk to myself sometimes as well. But it gives I find quite relaxed in that way. So anyway, I can help. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but no. No problem. Okay, so with regret, it should be a kind of direct attitude towards yourself and your behavior, and just logically seeing why is it negative, right? That's the thing. And if you saw that, that's it. That's just, it should not be done like this. I confess it, right? That's what it is. And then move on. Yeah, so that's the real constructive form of regret, rather than feeling this guilt feeling, or that's not very constructive, right? So that's kind of regret. Yeah, the first opponent power, as we call it. The second opponent power is the opponent power of reliance. Yeah, so we call it the opponent power of reliance. That means it relies on something. And so then first I explain the Buddhist interpretation. In Buddhism, then we have two aspects to the power of reliance. One is taking refuge, right? So you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yeah, we come to those aspects later also. So the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Yeah? So in particular here, the power of reliance in relation with the Buddha is important. Yeah? And the other aspect of the power of reliance is generating bodhicitta, or generating the mind of enlightenment, as we call it. Yeah? So there's two aspects to the power of reliance: generating refuge and generating bodhicitta. Yeah? So the two are the power of reliance. So why is that twofold? Why do we have those two aspects of the power of reliance? Because we always have created negative karma in relation with another person, right? So there's only two persons we talk about. One is sentient beings, and the other one is Buddhas, right? There's only two individuals, so to say. We have sentient beings, and we have Buddhas. Yeah? Buddha is a fully enlightened being. Sentient being is not enlightened. Yeah? So there's two. So we have two people we can react towards two, right? Or we can do a negativity towards two: sentient beings and Buddhas. So then, if you take refuge in the Buddha, you actually oppose the disrespect for the Buddha you might have in the past, right? So that's kind of, you purify the negative karma in relation with the Buddha if you respect the Buddha or you take refuge in the Buddha, right? So that's the first aspect of the power of reliance. The other power of reliance, which is even more important, is now you generate a wish of bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, meaning I want to become a Buddha in order to liberate sentient beings from their suffering. Right? So there's a wish to liberate beings from their suffering. Yeah? So that's completely opposed to what we have done previously, is to harm sentient beings. Right? So you can see that if you generate this bodhicitta, which is a wish for others to be free of suffering and take responsibility for that and want to become a Buddha for that purpose, that means it directly opposes the harm we have given to other sentient beings, right? So that's kind of, in the Buddhist context, the power of reliance is twofold: refuge and generating bodhicitta. Yeah, so because in the past we have created negative karma in relation with Buddhas and sentient beings, refuge purifies the aspect of the negativities we've done in relation with Buddhas, and generating bodhicitta, or the wish to liberate others from their suffering, that is opposing to harm sentient beings. So that means the power of reliance is needed in this aspect of the four opponent powers, to have the complete different attitude towards others. Instead of harming them, now you want to help them, right? So that's kind of the essence behind the power of reliance. Then if you're not a Buddhist, yeah, because not all of you are Buddhists, and it's all good to know the secular aspects or the universal aspects of it as well, if you like. So then you can think about, okay, the power of reliance, the regret is the same, more or less, right? And then the power of reliance is kind of a wish to help others, or a wish to not harm others, right? If you have a wish not to harm others, that opposes that aspect that you harmed others in the past, right? Yeah. So in a secular or universal way, you could think the power of reliance is just a wish to help others, right? To help others to be free of suffering, or to help others to find happiness. Yeah. So that's kind of a secular or universal aspect of the purification, if you wish. Yeah. Okay. So that's the power of reliance. Because the four opponent powers can be done within the Buddhist context of the practice, which is how it's mostly explained. But yeah, if people are not Buddhist, then still there's a possibility of purifying things, right? So also that's kind of a possibility. So I give the difference between the Buddhist practice and then the universal or the secular aspect. Okay, so there's regret and the power of reliance. Then the third opponent power is the actual antidote, as we call it, or the purification practice, if you like. So purification practice or the actual antidote. Yeah, that's the third opponent power. So what is this actual antidote or this purification practice? Basically, every virtue we engage in is opposing non-virtue. Right? So every positive thing we do is opposing negative things. And so in general, the purification method or the actual antidote, the purification practice, is engaging in virtue, meaning thinking about love and kindness, thinking about compassion, right? To generate positive states of mind opposes negative states of mind. And so the actual purification method or practice is any form of virtuous deeds, yeah, or practice generosity or help a person on the street or whatsoever, that's whatever positive thing we do is opposing negative deeds. Yeah, so that's kind of the purification method, so to say. That's a kind of a general one. Then in Buddhism, there's very sophisticated purification practices. Like you might have read in the suggested readings about VAJRASATVA practice, right? There's kind of a visualization technique. We can do a short, simplified form of that with Sakyamuni Buddha, if you wish. So this kind of, with VAJRASATVA is a kind of visualization technique of white light that comes from the heart of VAJRASATVA and then to the crown of your head and then fills your whole body. And then by receiving this light, so to say, or clean kind of aspects of brightness, yeah, then you can imagine it purifies all negative karma that is created by yourself in this and previous lifetimes. Yeah, and then there's normally we do that together with a mantra recitation. Yeah, so because in the Buddhist context, these mantras and these visualizations and these Buddha forms have an uncommon feature in the purification aspect. Yeah. For example, VAJRASATVA, when VAJRASATVA was not a Buddha yet, yeah, when it was still a person in training, so to say, but already having bodhicitta and having this incredible mind, then every day for lifetimes made this kind of promise, whoever in the future recites my name or recites my mantra or meditates on me, may that person purify all negative karma. And so that means if you make that prayer, not just once, but not just every day, but with a very concentrated mind over lifetimes, you can imagine and build a kind of potential, right? So that's kind of why VAJRASATVA has this very superior aspect of purification. Yeah, that's one aspect that we do. So we will do the simplified form with Sakyamuni Buddha, how to engage in this purification practice, to get an experience, and then see if you like it, you can do it. If you don't like it, then you can just leave it aside, right? Okay, so that's VAJRASATVA. Then there's another practice we do traditional, that's prostrations to the 35 Buddhas of confession. So there's kind of names of 35 Buddhas, and then you recite those names because each name has a particular potential to purify a certain amount of negative karma, and then you prostrate at the same time. Yeah, that's how Buddhists, sometimes you see people prostrating. That's kind of why we prostrate. Also, I prostrate in the beginning. So, yeah, I visualize my own teachers on a throne and then prostrate. I mean, throne, box. Yeah. And then I prostrate, for me as respect for the lineage, right? So, and as we prostrate to the Buddha or to teachers, then it's not just, often we do it as a custom or a habit, but actually we should think about, if you prostrate to the Buddha, for example, you think, okay, that's the Buddha for Buddhists, right? The Buddha is an emanation of love and kindness, compassion, and wisdom. That are the qualities, yeah, being embodied in this form of a Buddha, right? So then you make prostrations and you think, I want to become like that, right? So that's kind of a way to get closer, so you could say, to those qualities of the mind, yeah? So that's one reason why we prostrate. And then the prostration involves a little bit of hardship, especially if you do a little bit more. There's a kind of a tradition of do 100,000 full-length prostrations, right? So you can do that in a month or 2, 3. Depends on your physical, fitness, of course. Or you can do it over a longer period of time. Every day you do like 50 or whatsoever. So that's kind of a practice also to purify. You prostrate, then you imagine you prostrate to each of those 35 Buddhas, you recite the names, and white light comes to your crown and purifies negative karma, and that also has a kind of sophisticated aspect of purification. And there's more practices like that in the purification, but there are the two main common ones in Buddhist practice. But if you're not a Buddhist, then you can do other things. You can just visualize, as we're going to do with Sakyamuni Buddha, but if you don't like to do that, you can just imagine there's light in front of yourself, a ball of light, and that ball of light, you can imagine that is in the nature of love and kindness, compassion and wisdom, right? And then that light comes from that ball to your crown, and then you imagine you just being totally cleansed and washed with purification, right? So then you think all the negative karmas I've done in the past, I regret. You confess with the first opponent power. So we talked about regret, right? And then you generate a wish to help others rather than harming others. And then you do this purification practice. You see, so there's the first 3 opponent powers already there. So then you finish your purification practice, and then you come to the 4th opponent power. And that's the power of resolve. So you promise not to engage in that particular negative deed anymore, or not today, or not this hour. It's better to promise for what you can keep rather than promise too far away. So it's just logic reason. If you have the power of resolve and you say, okay, I'm not going to get angry anymore for the rest of my life, that's it. And then next week you might get angry and you lose all the effort in practicing patience, right? But if you promise, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to try not to get angry, and then you're much more aware. You have the alertness and the mindfulness, because it's a short period of time, and then you see a little bit of irritation coming, you said, okay, no, I promise myself not to get angry. It's stronger, right? And then you try for a day, then you try for 2 days, then you try for 3 days, and that's how you build up, so never promise what you cannot keep, And then also you can say, I try, instead of I'm not gonna do this, right? You have to be skillful with changing yourself, right? So the more skillful you are, the better the progress, So meaning that you promise for the period you can keep, you can keep, and then the effort remains, and then you've done it, and yes, I've done this, and then you say, okay, instead of half a day, now I'm gonna try a whole day, and then you keep the effort going, right? So that's the power of resolve, promising not to engage in a particular negative deed for a particular period of time. There's a very interesting story I always tell people. His Holiness Dalai Lama told the story. For monks and nuns, we have quite a lot of vows, and sometimes, some vows get broken if you eat after lunch or something like that. So then you confess twice a month, in an assembly. And then one of the masters was there as well. And then there's a kind of a ritual. The abbot, when you finish all the purification practice, then the abbot says, do you see your faults as fault? And you say, yes, I do. And do you see faults as fault? Yes, I do. Do you see faults as fault? Yes, I do. 3 times. And then the abbot says, do you henceforth restrain yourself? And then mostly in the text it says, yes, I do, right? But then this person came up and said, yeah, I will try. So that means he was honest with his practice, right? So that's very important with our promise. with our promise or the power resolve. Sounds like a different dimension. Yeah, so that's the four opponent powers, right? The power of regret, the power of dependence, it's twofold, refuge, and bodhicitta, or just having a wish in a secular way, wanting to help others. And then the power of the antidote, it can be any virtuous activity or prostrations or VAJRASATVA or those kind of aspects. And then the power of resolve is then the promise not to engage in these deeds you confess in the future, or at least for the period you can keep. Yeah, so maybe we do a short practice like that, no? We did previously already with Sakyamuni Buddha with the lights, remember? Yeah, when we meditate on the Lamrim. So it will be similar. If you don't like to visualize Sakyamuni Buddha, that's fine. You can just visualize white light. Yeah, it doesn't become a Buddhist practice, but that's also no issue, right? So you can use these techniques, even if you're, for example, a Christian or something like that. You can visualize Jesus or whatever. It's kind of, you can just, it doesn't become a Buddhist practice, but if it benefits the mind, then that's possible, right? Yeah. So I explained the Buddhist interpretation, but you can visualize instead of the Buddha white light or the ball of light, as I just indicated. That's up to the individual. Yeah, I will explain the Buddhist aspect. So then what we do, visualize the Buddha in front, and then we do the white light or the bright, clear light and a crown for your head, and then imagine all negative karma gets purified. Yeah. So then to add to that a little bit more, to be a bit more specific, then we can do it in 3 short periods, meaning first you think about the activities you've done with your body, right? And maybe not only this life, but in the Buddhist context, we think about lifetimes. Right? So you might have acted in the act of killing, maybe not directly human beings in this life, but sometimes insects when you were younger and not aware, and just kill mosquitoes or whatsoever. So you think about those aspects of killing. You might in previous lifetimes kill human beings, right? And then killing, stealing, you might have engaged in the past, and sexual misconduct. Yeah, so we talked about it already previously, what those 3 aspects of the body actually mean, right? And then you just try to think about that you might have done that in the past, and you confess it. Yeah, if you like to confess to the Buddha, you do that. If otherwise, you can just confess to yourself, and then you do the visualization with the white light, right? So that's kind of the way to go. So we do first the 3 negativities of the body, and then we do a little bit, 1 or 2 minutes purification, and then the 4 of the speech, right? And then we do the purification, and then the 3 of the mind. So then you have something to hold on to. Okay, now I'm confessing this. Now I'm purifying this. Yeah? Yeah, is that clear? Yeah. So before we start, try to maybe first we do the breathing exercise of counting the breath, right? To generate a little bit kind of calmness of the mind and concentration. As training in concentration meditation. So count every breath as in breath as 1, and out breath is 2, in breath is 3, and then count to 10 and start over counting. Yeah, make sure you have the mental factor alertness, seeing if your mind is drifting off or not, or you think about the past or the future and you notice that, and then with mindfulness you bring your mind back to the counting of the breath, right? So let's do that concentration meditation of counting the breath for about a minute or 2. then when the mind is settled down a bit, then imagine in front of yourself Sakyamuni Buddha, if you like. So there is a throne supported by snow lions and on each of the corners. And then there is a lotus, sun and moon disk. And on top of that is the Sakyamuni Buddha, full lotus position, and the right hand on his right knee touching the moon disk, and the left holds a begging bowl filled with nectar. And the Buddha is wearing the robes of a fully ordained monk and has a kind of golden colored body, like three-dimensional, made out of light, and a very peaceful and smiling face. So think the Buddha is like that in front of yourself, maybe at the level of your eyebrows, about a body's length away. And then the power of reliance, right? So for Buddhists, will at this time take refuge in the Buddha and generate the mind of enlightenment, or wanting to become a Buddha to liberate all sentient beings. So you can think like that. Otherwise, you can just think that you want to eliminate the suffering of others the best way you can, right? So generate either of those two options for yourself, right? To generate intention to be of benefit to others rather than harm others, right? So try to generate that for yourself mentally for about half a minute. And then if you wish, you can think about, first of all, the negativities you've done of the body. Yeah, so think about, you might have killed beings in the past, in previous lifetimes, definitely also humans and animals, right? And in present lifetimes, maybe insects, so generate kind of regret and thinking, all those beings, they also have feeling, and we ended their life, right? So that's kind of something that should not be done, right? It's not nice if somebody kills you as well. So think about that's negativity. And in a similar way, taking others' possessions or stealing, you might have engaged in maybe not this, but in previous lifetimes. And then sexual misconduct, right? Having sexual relationship with somebody else's partner without consent, So you might have harmed others in that way. So think about these 3 points for yourself for about, let's say, half a minute, and then generate kind of regret. Openly think that should not be done, and this is a mistake I made, and I openly confess that. So do that for about half a minute. And then, based on this regret, you make request to the Buddha in front, right? the white light, if you visualize the ball of white light, and then request to please bestow purification, and then you can imagine that the Buddha is very pleased, and from his heart comes this bundle of bright light, whitish colored light, to the crown of your head, and then imagine it purifies all these negativities of the body. We just generate regret of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. So it fills your body completely with bright light, and then imagine all this negativity of the body being created in this and previous lifetimes gets purified while doing this visualization of the white light. So let's do that for about a minute or so, and then also try to have regret over those deeds while doing the visualization, right? So then it's a more powerful purification. Yeah, so let's do that for about a minute. And then try to think that, now you're completely purified of those negative deeds of the body, yeah, so you're completely filled with this bright nectar light, yeah, and think and be convinced that actually you're completely purified like that. Yeah. And then let's think about the negativities we've created with the speech, so lying. We've deceived people in various ways in this and previous lifetimes, right? And then also we have engaged in kind of slander or decisive speech, right? To try to separate other people who go along well together or create a kind of disharmony among groups or individuals, right? So we might engage in that kind of speech as well. And also we might have scolded people with harsh words, It's also that you try to confess and regret. And we might have engaged a lot in kind of senseless talk, just talk about all kind of nonsense without really moving constructive in a kind of conversation or make time more worthwhile, right? So have some regret over those 4 activities of lying, slander, and harmful speech or scolding, and this kind of senseless talk, right? And generate regret over those activities done in this previous lifetimes, if you wish, for about half a minute or so. And with this request, again, we can make request to the Buddha in front, right? To please bestow purification and to purify these negative deeds. And then again, from the heart of the Buddha comes this bright light, whitish light, into the crown of your head and purifies all negative karma. And in particular, the negative karma, the speech, gets completely purified. Yeah, so I also like to do this, try to do this for about a minute or so. And then think you're completely filled with this white nectar light, and the negativity of speech are completely purified. Yeah. Be convinced about that actually happened. And in a similar way, think about negativities we've done of the mind, yeah, covetousness, or kind of very strong desire to obtain objects, and kind of anger or aversion or harmful intent, so to say, right? Have a harmful intent towards others. So we have engaged in those states of mind, as well as ignorance, yeah, that has always been present with us, not believing in cause and effect, or not, believing in the possibility of change, or those kind of aspects, or we have engaged in many times, So try to openly confess those three activities of the mind, yeah, do that for about half a minute. And then based on this regret, we can request to the Buddha in front. And then the Buddha is very pleased with your wish to purify. And then from his heart comes this white nectar light to the crown of your head and purifies all the negativities of negative karma, and in particular the negativities of the mind. Yeah, so also do this visualization for about, let's say, a minute. And also here now think you completely purified with these negativities of the mind, right? So also convinced that it actually happened, the purification. Yeah. And then we can do the power of resolve, right? So think that in front of the Buddha or in front of yourself, just make a kind of promise. You will not engage in these negativities in the future, or try at least, you're going to try not to engage in these negativities of the body, the speech and the mind, right? So make a kind of promise for yourself, whatever is possible for you. Yeah. So do that for yourself in front of the Buddha or just for yourself. And then you can request the Buddha to come to the crown of your head and then to dissolve into you, to bestow the blessings, or together with the purification as well, right? So the Buddha comes to your crown, and then the throne dissolves into the lotus, becomes smaller and smaller, the side of your thumb or even smaller than that, and then descends to your crown and to your throat and to the level of your heart. And I think the Buddha becomes one with your own mind, right? And so your mind gets completely purified by merging with the qualities of the Buddha. So imagine that actually happening. Feel some this sensation or bliss or some happiness at the level of your heart. Right, so then you stop. Yeah, that's morely how you structure a kind of purification practice with those 4 opponent powers. Yeah, so if you do later on, if you're interested in VAJRASATVA or other techniques, then it uses the same structure. Yeah, so then at least you know a little bit what the structure is with the 4 opponent powers and how to do the visualization in relation to those 4 opponent powers. Yeah. Then another aspect, rejoicing, we talked about it a little bit. That's very important, and it's very easy. You can just sit down on a nice, comfortable sofa with a cup of tea and cake, as we do in Britain, right? Tea cake, yeah, I would say, right? Yeah. So you can just sit and rejoice in other people's good deeds. You know, like for a Buddhist practitioner, we say we rejoice when you read a biography, for example, of a great master. You know, then you just feel happy about all those activities they engage in for the benefit of others, right? Or you look at the news and a person engaged in something positive, they think, oh wow, that's amazing. You just feel happy basically about positive deeds. Yeah, that's the act of rejoicing. That's a very easy way to accumulate merit, so to say. And it also opposes kind of jealousy. In particular, people you are jealous with. You know, when you see the person doing well, then you feel like not very happy. But instead of try to think, oh, that's nice, this person engaged in this activity, right? Then the jealousy goes, right? So that's why rejoicing in others' good deeds, so to say, opposes jealousy. And also, we say you get a part of the merit that in others. So merit means an accumulation of virtue, right? A certain amount of virtue is we call merit. Yeah, so that we talk a lot about merit because in order to become a Buddha, you need vast stores of merit, as we call it. You need a lot of positive potentials in your mind to be generated to create the causes for Buddhahood, right? And so that one of those activities can be rejoicing, that you rejoice in other good deeds, or for a Buddhist practitioner, we think about His Holiness Dalai Lama, for example, and think what a person like that is doing for society, for Buddhism, for interfaith movements, for the environment. And so you think about those aspects, and then you just, put your hands together, or you don't put your hands together, up to you. And then you just kind of, do, oh wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So because that creates also a cause for yourself to become like that, right? So that's the power of rejoicing. And then you get a part of the merit, because it's not that the person, because we cannot experience the result created by somebody else. Yeah, we just talked about. But you yourself generate an aspiration to engage in virtue within your own continuity of consciousness is an accumulation of merit, right? Is an accumulation of virtue. Yeah, so that's kind of how it works. Yeah, so rejoicing is a very important aspect of the training. Yeah, and it's very easy. You don't have to engage in hardships. You just rejoice in hardships. If you, for example, prostrations, we talk about 100,000 prostrations, which is not easy, right? And there's people like in holy places like Bodhgaya, when it's very cold in the morning and hot in the afternoon, they just engage in these activities. So you can just go around Kora, or we go circumambulation around the stupa, and then just like, and just rejoice in all the people who are doing these activities there, or prostrations. So then you actually get a part of the merit, not you get their merit and they lose it or something like that, but you in your own mind generate virtuous states of mind, right? And that's what we call the accumulation of merit, similar to the person who's prostrating, or similar to the person who's engaging in something positive. So that means that's quite important to engage in, or it's an easy way to engage in virtue. Yeah. So yeah, merit, there's two aspects, right? We accumulate virtue and we purify negative deeds. That's two very important aspects of the training. Because if you purify negative deeds, or, because all our negative thoughts and negative behavior comes from somewhere, right? Nothing is random. So that means our negative thoughts and negative behavior came from the past, of particular potentials within our continuity of consciousness, right? So we know that sometimes negative thoughts come, or sometimes a wish to harm, or something like that, or to say something, or to harm a person. That comes from somewhere, right? Of course, there's a condition of the person, but actually wish comes from the past, of previous habituation patterns or inclinations. So we know that those negative thoughts are there. So we know there is a need for purification, right? And then especially if you think about, we talked about, a few weeks, I think 2 weeks ago, when we talked about death and impermanence and the possibility of future state of existence. That also implies previous states of existence. Yeah, we talked quite a bit about the continuity of consciousness, and maybe we've not always been humans as we are at the moment. Yeah, so maybe we've been ape-like, like 40,000 years ago on this planet, and then those ape-like beings were not that kind to each other as also some humans are not that kind to each other, but we're a bit more civilized than those periods of time, right? So that implies that we might have engaged in all kind of negative deeds in the past. And the negative deeds or habituation patterns, they prevent our mind from developing, right? If you want to be a better human being, but those negative thoughts keep popping up, then it's very difficult to move forward, right? So that's why the need for purification is emphasized a lot. Because if you purify, you get rid of those old patterns or old habituation to negative deeds, right? So that's one aspect. You get rid of that with purification, and then you practice virtue. So that means your negative karma, you credit, we call it, right? Credit in the bank. Yeah, credit means you have more money, right? Debit means less, no? Yeah. So your credit in virtue increases, and the non-virtue decreases, right? So if you purify, your non-virtue decreases, and then you rejoice and you accumulate merit, you do positive deeds, then the virtue increases. So that means you actually move up to become a better human being, and then eventually liberation and enlightenment. Because we just talked about that non-virtue can be purified with its four opponent powers, right? And well, what can be purified? The potential for the result to come about can be purified. And then later on, with understanding emptiness, you can eliminate the seeds. So the non-virtue goes completely away, right? It's completely purified. And then you engage more and more in virtuous activity, and they develop more and more. And then eventually you're able to achieve these states of liberation and enlightenment. Yeah, so that's why we put a lot of emphasis on accumulation of merit or accumulation of virtuous deeds and purify negative deeds. Yeah, so then you move quicker on the path. There's also, in the end of discovering Buddhism, there's what we call integrated practices. There's kind of model 13. And then it explains how to do various practices to purify. And we just talked about already about prostrations, and we talked about VAJRASATVA. But to accumulate merit, there's also various activities that can be done. As you see here, people can see also not. No, it's just out of the screen. Yeah, but I keep going. Yeah. So we make offerings, for example, in this case for medicine Buddha Puja, we made offerings. So that's a way to accumulate merit, to make offerings to an object that represents these qualities of loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, right? So that's a way. If you make offerings, you come closer to that. You know, so that's why you make offerings. And then other aspect of accumulation of merit is what we call the mandala offering. It's kind of an offering of the whole universe. Yeah, so in the mandala offering is kind of a symbolic representation of the whole universe. So if you offer the whole universe to the Buddha, you know, then you think, oh, that includes all things, right? So you offer everything that exists. You know? So with intention to, because the ritual is like that, with intention to become a Buddha yourself. Yeah? So that is kind of with mandala offerings, you accumulate huge amount of merit, and then with purification practice like VAJRASATVA or 35 Buddhas, you confess negative deeds and purify. So there's sophisticated practices within Buddhism to accumulate more merit and purify more negative deeds. So if you do that, then the mind becomes much easier to transform, because the negative inclinations are being taken away and the positive potentials are being built up. So if you do a lot of purification practices and accumulation of merit, then it's much easier to understand things like emptiness. It's much easier to generate these qualities of love and kind, compassion, and wisdom. So the more you accumulate merit, the more you purify, then you go much quicker into the path, the stages of the path to enlightenment. And that's kind of sophisticated preliminary practices, as we call it. There's a group of 9. We go into that in the last model, right? The model number 13. And that's a very sophisticated system. And I've seen many people, of course, I've seen many people, but within the Buddhist practice as well, and those who engage seriously, who are Buddhists, right? So it's, yeah, we're discovering Buddhism. So who are serious with the Buddhist practice and they engage in a lot of these kind of preliminary practices, the mind becomes very stable. The understanding becomes very stable. And the insights become, easier. You know, so that's kind of, because all the negative deeds we've done in the past prevents us from moving forward in our development. Yeah? So that's purified. And then with the accumulation of merit, we put incredible potentials in your mind to get ready to get the realizations. Yeah? So the more a person engages in the preliminary practices, then the quicker the realizations come. Yeah? So, and in particular is that we can see that in the various traditions, engage in these kind of preliminary practices, and then the mind becomes much more capable of understanding and eventually realizing emptiness. For example, Lama Tsongkhapa, one of the masters from the Gelug tradition within the Tibetan tradition of Nalanda, then when he was in his early 20s, he was kind of, or late 20s, he was an incredible scholar. You know, he wrote commentaries. It was mind-boggling. You know, so he had read like 21 different Indian commentaries and probably more or less memorized them the way he composed his commentary, right? So then he was sitting in a kind of a prayer festival, and then he was so in absorption of meditation that everybody left. It was the end of the puja, but he didn't notice that everybody had left. So you have quite some concentration, you could say. But then he asked Manjushri, because he was very pure mind, so he could see the Buddhas in front of himself, and asked Manjushri, do I have the correct understanding of emptiness now or not? And you said, So then Lama Tsongkhapa said, what should I do? And then Manjushri said, which is the Buddha of wisdom, said you have to engage in this preliminary practice. You have to purify, and you have to accumulate merit, and then together with that study, you know, and then he got it. So this kind of, in a traditional context of Buddhist practice, then it is it's a quite important aspect of purification and accumulation of merit. Yeah, so that's more or less what I have to cover today. Yeah, if there's any questions left, then or not left or just there, then you can ask. Yeah. Then yeah.
Okay, so why don't we start with our friends online, if anyone has any questions. Sarah, I think you were first. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Geshe.
Yeah.
Just on the purification practices, how often should you engage in them? Is that like a kind of daily process? I guess it depends how long you've been practicing for as well, but when you're just starting to do it, is there a good amount to do it?
How much time you have, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's good to get proper instructions first of all, right? If you really like to engage in these kind of preliminary practices, it's important to get the right instruction, study it well, you know, and then all based on the Lamrim or the stages of the path to enlightenment, yeah. And then based on those kind of aspects of getting the good understanding of it, then you can engage in it on a daily basis, or you can decide, okay, first I work mainly on VAJRASATVA, or first I work mainly on prostrations, and then you just accumulate every day a certain amount, right? And then you go, traditionally speaking, all the way up to accumulation of 100,000. Yeah, that's kind of 100,000 sets of each. And then when you engage in that, you don't break it, for example. Yeah, you just don't do one day and then next day you don't do anything, and then another day somewhere. You try to do every day at least a little bit. Yeah, at least kind of 3 prostrations at the minimum, or 3 VAJRASATVA recitation at the minimum. Yeah, that's that's kind of a way to do that. But yeah, we're going to talk about it more somewhere to the end of the course next year, right? To what are these practices? Yeah, because you have to have a stable understanding. But you can, if you like, to what we did now today, and then slowly you read more, and you can, you know, play with it a little bit, get some experience, right? Yeah. And if you have a good understanding of it all, then you can engage in it more seriously, in the sense that dedicate more time and you do every day a little bit, you know. And then whenever you have some more time, for example, you have a weekend free or a few days free, you can do a few more, right? Or you can do a little bit more, so you accumulate more. But every day it's good to do at least like 3 times a mantra, VAJRASATVA, if you do that, or prostrations, for example, right? Yeah, so don't break the continuity, so to say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And just a reminder as well to our friends in Spain that you will have an opportunity to ask questions in a separate session. So if your question can wait, then that's much appreciated.
On Monday, I meet with my Spanish friends.
Monday. Abelardo, please.
Thank you. It was a precious teaching today, Geshe. All your teachings are precious, but today's was very good for me.
Special precious. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I have several questions, practice related, but I think that hopefully they'll help the whole group. The first one is based on what you said about the contaminated virtuous karmas. question is, how can one discern internally, in what aspect one's action might be virtuous, and in what aspect it's more based on self-interest. Mm-hmm. And I try to be mindful when I do good things about, try to discern. But is there a systematic way that you could advise us to do?
I mean, it's basically just generating more awareness of the various states of mind, right? And what is your motivation and intention behind a particular activity? Yeah. So that also over time you start to know more about your mind. Initially we don't know too much about the inner world because we're mostly distracted with the external world. But over time you become more aware of your intentions and motivations behind activities, right? Same with Geshe Ben, when he saw he had a wrong motivation, so he just was very honest with himself, grabbed his arm and said, stop the thief, right? So it's kind of, if you're honest with yourself and you're more aware, then you notice these kind of intentions, right? So that's the first step. And that awareness comes when we do this concentration meditation we do whenever we do meditation, right? So if you do concentration meditation on a regular basis, meaning every day, just for a few minutes or throughout the day, you repeat it, then you train in this awareness building, because alertness becomes stronger. Alertness becomes really developed. So then you're much more alert about a particular mind that comes up. You say, oh, that's a sneaky of myself. I shouldn't think like this, right? And then with mindfulness, you bring your mind back to your good intention for the day or the good motivations you should have. Yeah. So with those two mental factors, we actually start to be more aware, and not only aware, but also moving our mind in a particular direction, right? Mm-hmm. We want to go.
I try to integrate in my self-analysis or awareness both the cognitive and the emotional aspect. And so when I do a good deed and I feel then good, for example, I ask myself, well, am I feeling good because I'm saying, oh, what a great guy you are? And or if I'm really feeling, the happiness of the other person.
But there's nothing wrong in feeling good if you do something good, right? That's kind of what we call rejoicing. Yeah. But then if you put it on your social media and tell everybody, look how good I am, then maybe you're not on the right track. Yeah. But just for yourself, you can think, okay, yeah, that feel, that if you done something good and that feels good, that's fine, that's good. Then you rejoice, think, oh, great, I want to do this more. But you don't boost it to the external world. You just keep it for yourself, right?
Yeah. My other question has to do with the guided meditation we did today, which precious meditation, really. Now, the part that has, I identify several dimensions, the actual thoughts and how one relates that to one's own life and experience. But then there's the part about the light coming in, and that is that somehow affecting the subtle mental body?
I mean, it's basically, it's like, I would say this. It's basically kind of it's not, the Buddha said, I cannot wash away your sins with water, right? But if you have strong faith that this light is actually purifying with those four opponent powers, then it works. So that means that it's a kind of a metaphor of cleaning, right? So if you, in a similar way, this purification practice we can also do when we vacuum our room, or when you turn on your washing machine, for example. You washing your clothes and you vacuum in your room anyway, right? So instead of just doing it because you have to do it, you can first sit down and don't let the other people see you doing that. You just sit down and then you just, generate, for Buddhists, generate refuge, and then think by, turning on the washing machine, may all the dirt of the clothes be washed, but in a similar way, may my stains in my mind be purified, in order to develop and to liberate all sentient beings. So you have the 4 opponent powers there, and then you turn on the washing machine, and then you think, okay, I'm going to try to do better in my coming period of my life or in all future lifetimes. So they have the 4 opponent powers. It takes you a few seconds, right?
Right.
To do washing anyway. So you have those 4 opponent powers. Or when you vacuum your room, same thing. You think the vacuum cleaner and, your method and wisdom in your 2 hands. And there's many ways to think like that. And you can recite VAJRASATVA mantra when you're vacuuming. And that's very powerful. So everything that has to do with cleaning, so to say, you can make a purification practice, or you stand in the shower. We shower every now and then, right? So that means then also you can recite VAJRASATVA mantra or have the 4 opponent powers, and then the water is coming, but you think you purify, So the mental aspect is important, right? That means if the 4 opponent powers are complete, combined with the visualization technique, it has the power to purify these aspects. So that's why we use visualization techniques to do that, to be more convinced it's working. But also other activities, what I just said, with cleaning or whatsoever, then you can use it as a tool. Same as the Buddha, when this Chuba was not capable of memorizing 1 verse, right? I know of your story, but he met Shariputra, and Shariputra said, oh, if you're very difficult to get realizations, become monk, everything, forget it. So he was depressed, met the Buddha, and the Buddha said, what happened? He said, this happened. Yeah, Shariputra can only see 100 lifetimes. I saw a few more lifetimes of you, and you created some merit. If you purify, you gain realizations. So then the Buddha said, okay, you do one thing, you sweep the temple from the front to the back, right? And whenever you sweep the temple, you think, sweeping the stains or the dust, I sweep the stains of my mind. Sweeping the dust, I sweep the stains of my mind. So then he was from the front to the back, and then by the Buddha miracle power, there was dust again in the front. So he was just constantly sweeping the temple. But then eventually he was able to purify negative karma, right? And then got the realizations and became an arat in that life. So that means whatever activity we engage in, if we put our mind into it with a good intention and with these 4 opponent powers, then every activity that is involved with cleaning can bring this kind of practice.
Great, wonderful answer. My final question is very related to this. A phenomenon I've been experiencing quite lately is in concentration meditation. I'm able to put my mind totally clear, let's say, and then I look inside the lids of my eyes, and it's like a projection screen, and sometimes naturally, like an image of a Buddha will come, and very vividly, then it disappears. Is that a technique?
It's important when you do visualization meditation. It should be a mental consciousness, right? Not the eye consciousness. We meditate with mental consciousness. So when you visualize, then it's actually the mental consciousness that is active. So
but my eyes are closed when I do this, and so it's coming to mind.
Don't think about too much about your eyes when you visualize with your mental consciousness, because that by itself can become a distraction, right?
I don't think about my eyes.
Even if you do concentration meditation on one object and you see Buddhas appearing, right? It's nice, but for the meditation you actually engaging in is a distraction, right? So that's also important to know. When you engage in one particular meditation, then that should be your main focus, right? And anything else than that.
No, but I'm not engaging on any object. My mind is totally blank. My eyes are closed, and I was, I start with the breath. I don't count breaths, just
observing.
And the mind is completely blank, and then with my eyes closed, my eyelids inside like a projection screen, spontaneously, images will appear. That's all.
But you always have to know what is the purpose of your meditation at a particular time. If it's just observing consciousness, right, to get a taste of what consciousness is, then everything else by itself is kind of distraction, right? Otherwise, it's quite easy to engage in kind of a daydreaming kind of aspect, right? And this thing comes up, that things come up, and you follow all those individual images. So then you don't really move forward in your meditation, because when the mind gets a little bit more subtle, when you focus on consciousness itself, then images can sometimes appear, but that can also lead to a distraction, right? So you have to be aware of that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Abelardo. Jeff, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the teaching. Very, very interesting questions there from Abelardo.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I guess this is more of a comment, but I've been thinking about when you, about karma, and when you were saying that there is nothing random, but sometimes it can appear as though there's nothing, that things are random, but it's really that karma can be so complicated, so it gives the impression of randomness, but it's not actually random. And it reminds me of David Bohm's ideas on order itself. And for example, he discusses it in one of his books called Science, Order and Creativity. And he goes into different levels of order, simple order of a straight line, and it gets much more complicated. And he even introduced the implicate order, which went beyond the order currently in physics from, say, points in space-time. And there's a lot of development left to be done in the implicate order. He didn't finish all the work in his lifetime, of course. Anyway, I just wanted to mention, just giving that background, that David Bohm didn't really like to say that there was disorder. He felt that he discussed order going of a greater and greater and greater degree. So he felt that there is no such thing as disorder, rather there's order of an infinite degree, or a very large degree, or approaching an infinite degree. And that reminded me of karma being behind randomness, and there's no true randomness. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, so you said yourself already, there is no true randomness, although it appears like that. So we don't see the complete picture, right? Same, because the order is very complex, then sometimes we think it's the disorder, but actually it's not. So David Bohm, for example, was the first quantum physicist who could make a correlation between general relativity, that's Einstein put forward, and quantum mechanics. So he could see the correlation between the two. He was one of the first, So that means that he got an understanding of more subtle levels of reality, although you cannot really understand it, and that's why they call it the implicate order, right? So with karma is very similar. Certain aspects of karma we can understand, and certain aspects of karma are just too complex. We cannot understand. So that's very simple to the implicate and the explicate order in that way. It's this, they're related with each other. Certain aspects of that reality of cause and effect relationship we can understand, but certain aspects we cannot understand. But they too are related with each other. Right? So that's in that way there's a correlation there as well for us with karma, as well as David Bohm's implicate and explicate order, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
That means everything is based on cause and effect relationships, and if we don't really understand that complexity, then we might think it's random, but it's not. So that's very good insight.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Pedro, please go ahead.
Thank you, Geshe, for the teachings. I have a question about the practice, the antidotes. I read some
Antidotes.
Could you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I was thinking about, for example, is there some specific practice for specific karmas? I read in a book, for example, about Yamantaka and about heavy karma, and I have this doubt about specific practice for specific negative deeds.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, because even within the 35 Buddhas of confession, certain names of certain Buddhas purify a particular amount of negative karma, right? And then, so there's various sutras or practices. If you read them, then, for example, Mitrupa, there's one deity you can practice to purify negative karma of broken morality, for example. There's one practice called Samaya Vajra to practice to purify negative karma in relation with a relationship with a teacher that is not being followed properly. You know, so there's various aspects of negative karma that has an uncommon way of purification as well. You know? But all negative karma can also be purified with like VAJRASATVA, for example, right? So many, what we call the general purification practices like VAJRASATVA and prostrations, they have the capacity to purify all negative karma, with the exception of the seeds or the potentials that are left, right? If you haven't realized emptiness. So VAJRASATVA says, if you recite my mantra 100,000 times, all negative karma can be purified. But that means you have to have the 4 opponent powers complete, you have to have the faith, you have to have the single point concentration. You know, all the factors have to be completely perfect, which is for us ordinary beings quite difficult, because we recite the mantra for a few minutes, but on the moment of few minutes, most of the time, the mind is distracted. Yeah, so that means, you know, if all the factors are complete of concentration, faith, and the blessings, everything, then it has this incredible potential. But yeah, that's true. There's certain practices that purify karma in general, and there's specific practices for purifying specific aspects of broken vows or heavy negative karma, of the 5 heinous crimes of killing, you know, an arat or your parents, and those kind of heavier negative karma can be purified with things like the Nyungye retreat, which is a fasting retreat ritual for 2 days, you know. So that means, yeah, Buddhism is very rich, you know, and particularly in this field, has many aspects of purification practice. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. I have one question.
Yeah.
Could a repeated dream be a sign to, for example, I guess, for example, this repeated dream could be related a past life. Could this be a sign of something that should be purifying this life?
I mean, dreams in general are mistaken forms of consciousness, right? So don't hang on dreams too much. But if dreams repeat itself, then that can be a sign of a habituation pattern, right? So then if it's a very negative deed, or you engage in negativity in the dream, right, that implies you might have done something like that before. Otherwise, it will not happen in the dream. Nothing is random, as we say. Yeah, so if you have engaged in negative deeds in the dream, although if you kill a person in your dream, you don't have the karma of killing, right? The dream is just a mistaken form of consciousness, but it might indicate of having done something like that in the past. Yeah, so then that might be an indication of doing some purification practice, for example, in relation with that particular activity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Geshe.
Welcome. Yeah. Okay.
Does anyone in the compound have any questions?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Geshe. Does suffering could be a form of purifying?
Yeah.
Like a sickness?
We didn't talk about it yet. Yeah. So every form of suffering is basically a ripening of negative karma, right? So if negative karma comes to ripening, that means the potential is going away. So in the future, you won't have that same experience again. But if you are sick and you think in that way, and you do with this 4 opponent powers, think, oh, by being sick now, may all my negative karma ripen in this sickness. Then the purification becomes more sophisticated. If you're just sick, then it's still ripening, but it doesn't become very sophisticated. So then you can think, okay, I'm purifying this negative karma, or may I purify all negative karma created in the past by experiencing this sickness? Then the purification becomes stronger, right?
I have to be conscious.
Yeah, for that case you have to be conscious, right? In general speaking, the ripening, if the ripening effect comes, then the potential loses its potential, right? So when you get sick, that particular negative karma is finished, right? To a certain extent, yeah. But if you then think, oh, may all negative karma ripen in the sickness, then by the sickness alone you can purify more. But you have to have the mental intention for that. And there's even more sophisticated systems we will discuss later in the model on bodhicitta, for example, that you take away suffering of others upon yourself. There's visualizations you can do to based on compassion, right? And then there's very interesting stories about people with incurable sicknesses, for example, purifying with this intention, because we have created negative karma in relation to others, right? So now you take the suffering of others upon yourself, and by experiencing that, you create so much purification, so that incurable sicknesses sometimes get cured, because the cause for the sickness, the negative karma, gets purified. If that's purified, then the sickness goes, right? So that's kind of very sophisticated kind of forms of purification in the context of taking the suffering of others, what we call Tonglen, or giving and taking. It's very interesting stories in Tibet, and make great masters who've done that a lot, and then also in being tortured in prison, and then they couldn't do anything about the situation, so they could only deal with the mind, and this is the kind of practices, and there's no post-traumatic stress disorder when they come out of this torture and years of hardships, right? So it's a very powerful mind, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone to be happy today. Basically, I think I got a few questions, but I'm going to ask you only once, quite late. You're talking about the positive and negative, yeah? I grew up in a spiritual life, in a spiritual family, not by choice. Basically, we believe in a middle way, which is very powerful when you see between these two. You cannot, I mean, I can stop seeing negative and the positive come. It goes together. It's a yin and a yang, the way I see it. But the way I grow up is in spirituality. We see the middle way in everything. But we cannot against to negative to positive. Without one, it cannot work.
Yeah, I
without
mean, everything is
one.
related, right?
Everyone is related.
Yeah.
Is the Buddha have the middle way?
The Buddha, we have a middle way in various ways, right? The middle way from the point of view of behavior, right? That when you too strict with yourself, yeah, like a guitar, you know, that's the middle way of behavior. When the string is too tight, the sound is not good. When it's too loose, it's not good. So the way how we practice, for example, there's a middle way. Then another middle way we talk about of the extremes of the view, right? There's no, things don't exist from their own side. That's one aspect, right? That things existing from its own side, that's one extreme. And that nothing exists at all is not extreme. So the Buddha in that way is actually in the middle way. But then in relation to what you're saying, there's a dependence. There's no positive karma if there's no negative karma, right? It's depending on each other. But eventually we have to purify negative karma and create more positive karma. And then we go all the way up to these stages of nirvana or enlightenment. And then at that time, then the negative karma is gone, right? Yeah.
So basically, when you purify, you're doing good things to others to basically to get back to you. So, all
yeah,
right.
you create the causes for
you also forces,
yeah,
right? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. C'est ça, and they say in French. Okay. Yeah, fini. Okay, for this year. Okay. Yeah. So try to in the coming period, try to review material, and there will be review sessions and discussions being organized. So try to also read a little bit more about the Lamrim if you're interested. Yeah, around these topics. There's various Lamrim texts you can find in the course material in suggested readings, right? So try to read around a little bit more, because we need education, right? We need a little bit more knowledge, and then in the review sessions and question answer sessions, try to clarify more things and try to contemplate also a little bit, think about things, right? If it's true or not, and why is it true or not? And then, yeah, try to make the coming few months, as we say, meaningful in that way. And then, yeah, I go to Nepal next Tuesday. I have to give a course in, somewhere in Nepal for about a month, and then after some other commitments. So yeah, then see you again somewhere in, spring next year, in May. So yeah, try to use the in-between period the best way you can, and contemplate things and discuss with others, and then, yeah, we see each other on the other side. I mean, on the side, meaning next year, right? Yeah. And my Spanish friends, I still have a question and session on Monday, I think. Yeah, going Tuesday. Okay, so thank you very much. So then we can dedicate the merit, so to say, in a particular direction. Yeah, so having discussed and talked about karma and previously death and rebirth and all the other topics we did this year. So also try to think, you put that in a particular direction for development of self and others, in particular generating more qualities of mind, love and kindness, compassion, wisdom, and or the two bodhicittas, mind for enlightenment and understanding ultimate reality, and that all beings may be able to move in that direction to achieve more forms of sustainable happiness, all the way up to liberation and enlightenment. So try to dedicate all our positive potentials or merit in that way. Dagi jine sabe gewadi tendang jawar kunlang yambandai keba jetsun lozam japai tembe ningpo rindu selje sho. May our glorious life but on this table, may all beings equal in the extent of space have happiness, and may I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Janjo Senjo Rinpoche Magye Panam Geshe Geba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gongde Bawa Shu Toni Tawa Rinpoche Magye Panam Geshe Geba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gongde Bawa Shu. Okay, thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you. And I just want to say as well, just to mark the occasion, because we finished another module of discovering Buddhism. So I just wanted to say congratulations to everybody, and thank you for sticking with it, for learning Dharma. And also thank you to you, Geshe. And as Justine has written in the chat, take lots of care, and please come back safely.
Yeah.
To continue teaching us.
I will try. Yeah. Do my best. Okay, thank you also, and the rest of the team and all the students. Yeah.